And there we go. Well, welcome tonight to our 16th Doc Rob Live. That's almost a year and 6 months, getting there, year and 4 months. And tonight the topic is the microbiome. And I want to explain to you, as a holistic vet, I'm always trying to find, what is the one thing that, that creates that is responsible for creating all health? Is there one thing, in fact, that it is responsible for that? And I do believe the microbiome comes pretty close to filling that role because as you'll see, it does have global impact on the health of an animal, a human, or or a four-legged type of pet. Even, and I'm sure there's microbiomes in worms and all sorts of any animal that has a digestive system would be subject to a microbiome. And we know that the microbiome is more than just in the gut. We have microbiome in the skin and the eyes and the mouth, the ears. Um, so we're going to talk about that quite a bit. We're going to talk about what products we have that are friendly for the microbiome, and what are some more invasive approaches um, to improve microbiome health and function. And then, of course, we'll go at the end. We'll go to our Q&A. So we always begin these with these slides regarding housekeeping and my disclaimer. And so we do have some questions from email. We don't have a ton. So we are looking hopeful that you'll have some questions that might come up in the middle of the talk. That's great. Put them in the chat. We'll take them there. We'll take them from there. Um, and we will answer all the questions, no matter how long it takes. So you don't have to worry about being left out or not getting your question answered. And if there are common questions, we'll of course, give those priority and try to answer that common thread. And then, at any time, if you're not understanding what I'm saying, sometimes I talk too fast, sometimes I um, don't explain things clearly. Want you to understand that's the important part, not that not that I keep spouting. So, raise your hand, let us know. And then, my disclaimer here is that, of course, we want to answer your questions, but there are certain constraints that I have, imposed upon me by veterinary ethics and imposed upon by the FDA as far as, making medical claims and giving medical advice without having a doctor-patient relationship. So think of the words that I'm speaking to you around your question, around your pet, not so much as being medical advice as being educational advice. And certainly you can reach out to me. We've got a variety of different locations where my email is, and you can go on the website and find ways of reaching me through email and, ask me your question there. And I do my very best to answer them all. Sometimes I see some going into spam, and if your email's anything like mine, every day there's tons, hundreds. And so I go through those and delete them, but I always try to make sure within my spam filter that I'm not missing somebody, but sometimes I do. So if you don't hear from me in a reasonable enough period of time, bug me, squeaky wheel gets the grease, so let me know that I didn't respond to you and I will do my best to do that. Um, and these are ongoing. We're doing them about pretty much the fourth Thursday of each month at the same time, depending, maybe there's a holidays or other things going on where we can't, but we're doing it pretty good. We record them live. So those of you who can't attend a meeting, we do, as long as you register, we've got your email, so we will send out the recording, which is also on our YouTube channel. But we also have documents. We've got the slides. We've got a handout that I'm hoping gets distributed to the email list of registrants um, even before these meetings. Maybe it's not happening as that way, but it would be nice if we could get them to you. That way you could kind of take notes along. But you can also go back once you get these documents. You can go back to the recording and go over things that are of interest to you and take notes there. Um, And then I've written a book. There's a mushroom for that. And although I don't specifically refer to the text, it really is the reference text for these live events. And I encourage you to pick it up through Amazon. And if you do pick it up through Amazon and you send us your receipt, we're happy to offer you a discount coupon for 2 times for anything on our website. So that gives you an inducement to get the book. It's doing quite well. We've sold quite a bit of it. I'm heading out in 10 days to the Telluride Mushroom Festival, where I'll also be doing a book signing and speaking on the topic called Fungi for Phyto. And the Mushroom Festival is really kind of the peak of I've finally arrived. It's really world famous, world renowned, and has been going on for many, many years. And so I'm really honored that they would ask me to come and speak there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Alrighty. So, like I said, our topic tonight is the microbiome. And one of my favorite phrases is where the rubber meets the road for creating healthy pets. I love that. This is where the rubber meets the road. I used to listen to a lecturer on functional medicine, guy named Jeffrey Bland, and he would always use this phrase when he was talking about something that was really important and really practical. This is where the rubber meets the road. And really, the microbiome isn't a bunch of philosophical thinking and intellectual stuff and scientific findings, although there's a lot of science behind it, but it's really something very, very practical that we can do, you can do for your pet every single day. And there's some more invasive, aggressive ways of addressing the microbiome, but many of the things that we've been talking about here these last couple of months where I've been talking about diet, this is really important, a really important foundation for a healthy microbiome. So everything I've been talking about really fits into the health of the microbiome. Now, I wanted to let you know that many years ago, probably 2010, when I was lecturing to veterinarians and I was really big on a concept called leaky gut. And leaky gut is thought to be the gateway to many types of chronic diseases. And our bowel, we eat a lot of food, but not all that we eat is good is food. Some of it's toxins and antigens and things that we really don't want to be absorbing. And our gut has a natural intelligence about how to take in the good stuff and keep out the bad stuff. But when things happen, you have antibiotics, you take drugs, you're under stress, drink alcohol, all kinds of different things, have infections, then oftentimes the gut becomes leaky and things that should be eliminated, through the stool, in fact, get absorbed through the circulation, including antigens, can stimulate the immune system for allergies, and bacteria can sneak into the blood circulation and go to parts of the body and cause problems. So I was teaching a series of lectures to veterinarians about leaky gut, and I came upon this study. And I thought the study was really fascinating, and I really want to share it with you because I think you'll get a kick out of it, and I think it'll speak to the value of what I'm about to talk. Now, early on, we knew that there were almost an uncountable number of different types of organisms in the bowel: bacteria, fungi, yeast, protozoa. There were so many of them, and many of them were so fastidious that that we couldn't actually culture them all to identify them. And in the old days, in 2003, those are the old days now. We didn't, we, that the only way we could identify these organisms would be to culture them and then put them through microbiological identification. So now that we have the ability to identify organisms by their DNA, and it's something called PCR, we now can actually enumerate the thousands of different species that are found in the bowel by their DNA. And so since that has happened, it has allowed us really to really describe the microbiome scientifically. Back then, this was some early work, and they had found, I'm not quite sure where this got started, but they found that and this is a study out of Australia, there's a disease called ulcerative colitis. It's kind of like the worst case of inflammatory bowel disease, in such that you actually get ulcers in your colon. It can be a reason why people wind up having their colon removed, and they have to have these colostomy bags, to collect the poop because their colon is so diseased. And they treat it with a lot of strong drugs, which sometimes work pretty well, sometimes don't work so well. And what they found out, and this was a case study of 6 patients, but what they found out was that if you took feces from a healthy human being that was free from parasites and pathogenic organisms, and you gave it to that human being through a retention enema, they would be cured of ulcerative colitis. So let me show you the next slide here. It kind of builds this whole thing up. Oh, that wasn't the one I wanted. Sorry. Okay. So they in the study they say that intestinal flora is suspected of playing an important role in the pathogenesis of ulcerative colitis. What they're talking about is the microbiome. When the microbiome is out of whack, it allows diseases like ulcerative colitis to occur. In a previous study, they were able to cure Clostridium difficile, which is mainly the organism that we find with ulcerative colitis in human patients by infusing human fecal flora, that means basically stool, through retention enema into human beings. And they used 6 patients, and they had diagnosed through colonoscopies these lesions of ulcerative colitis, and they were given these retention enemas containing fecal suspensions harvested from healthy animals who were screened for parasites and bacterial pathogens. All of these patients had suffered severe recurrent symptoms for 5 years or less and were on strong anti-inflammatory drugs to treat this condition. And the fecal floral donors, they were healthy adults. They were screened for parasites and bacterial pathogens, and they were all administered by retention enema. What they found was complete reversal of symptoms was achieved in all patients by 4 months post-human probiotic infusion, is what they're calling it, by which time all other ulcerative colitis medications had stopped. And when at follow-up up to 13 years post-human, this human fecal infusion, human probiotic infusion, they're calling it HPI, and without any ulcerative colitis medications, there was no clinical, colonoscopic, or histopathologic evidence of ulcerative colitis in any patients. Now, I get the question a lot, and maybe you've got, a dog that does this, but many dogs will eat their poop or eat another dog's poop. And we never, never, we make up reasons why. One reason I'd heard was maybe they eat kibble, and they're never, and the kibble doesn't get completely digested, so the dogs think they don't care if something smells like poop, if as long as it might have some kibble and they'll eat it. But this makes a lot more sense that dogs have this intuitive sense that there is that eating the poop of another dog may inoculate them with bugs that will help them overcome whatever their GI issue is. So this was really, this was pre microbiome. We didn't really have a word microbiome at this point in time, but this was the beginning of that inquiry into why does this happen? Because ulcerative colitis is not a good disease, if you know anyone that's had it. So this was really exciting. And it turns out that there were several veterinarians who now are really very active in the microbiome world, teaching and writing books and doing a lot of work there, that attended my lectures these years ago, and that it wound up inspiring them to inquire into this even further. And I remember I would have in some veterinary lectures, I would speak to veterinarians. I remember there was one cat that raised her hand, and she said, Doc, this is no big deal. I've been doing this for years. Um, I would, and when we would have a kitty cat come in that had this chronic diarrhea thing, or inflammatory bowel disease, we'd go in the back to the clinic cat's cat box. We'd take a little bit of the stool out and we'd roll it up into a little ball, probably wearing gloves, and then we would pill the cat with that, and it actually worked, curing their whatever that GI problem was that they had. So this is not really something new. But it is something that we now have the science to back it up. We've got some amazing studies that I'll share with you at the end. And the only downside to it is that, we're talking about feces, as far as this very aggressive, invasive approach to addressing the microbiome. And, not everyone's that keen on feces, But what I'm going to be talking about tonight is not so much using the fecal transfers, the which we have in capsules, and we also do by retention enema in dogs and cats. But I'll be talking about everything else, the diet and everything else that you can do to improve your pet's microbiome health. So maybe we don't need to do that, but if we do, we also have that as something that's available to do. So understanding the microbiome. Tonight, we're going to talk about what is the microbiome, the gut microbiome, because we're not going to talk about the other ones, but there are others, and we'll show you a diagram about that. What the microbiome does and why it matters. We're going to talk about how antibiotics, diet, illness, and other factors can disrupt the microbial balance. In other words, disrupt the microbiome. And we're going to talk about the 5 pillars of microbiome restorative therapy, which are really quite simple when you think about it. We've been talking about them quite a bit here already, just not describing them that way. And we're going to talk about some current research about what its potential use would be in pets, in your pet, and then, and how we can all get started providing your pet with MBRT. MBRT is microbiome restorative therapy. I guess putting therapy at the end is a little bit redundant there, but I wanted to make a point. Okay, so what is the microbiome? Well, one definition is it's a dense ecosystem of microbes in the GI tract or in a different organ tissue. But here we're talking about gut, impacting digestion, immunity, and overall resilience, healthy resilience. And we achieve optimal health when this ecosystem is in balance. And there's a term called dysbiosis. We mentioned it in our little newsletter there. And this is when that ecosystem becomes unbalanced. And oftentimes, this unbalance can be caused by antibiotics, especially the favorite antibiotic of so many veterinarians. And I'm not saying they're bad, they just don't know. That's why I want to start teaching veterinarians about this. Metronidazole, Flagyl. This is the first antibiotic that most veterinarians reach for when a dog or cat has not just giardia, but has diarrhea from any source, even if they haven't done a fecal culture to find out there's actually a bacterial source. And what they're founding, right? What they're finding with metronidazole is that it not only does it really mess up the microbiome, but the changes that it makes in the microbiome are really hard to reverse back. So sometimes the best way to improve the microbiome is to avoid certain things. And these days, even the conventional vets, the internal medicine specialists, they're saying, don't reach for those antibiotics. There's other ways that we can treat diarrhea with supportive care, with things that are like nutraceuticals and herbs, clay, our RX clay, for instance, is a great way to treat diarrhea. And oftentimes, instead of trying to just stop it right there, you kind of have to let it run its course. We don't like this diarrhea, especially on our expensive carpets, but nonetheless, it's better than, because once you start messing with the microbiome with antibiotics, it's really hard to get it back into balance. And oftentimes it might stop that diarrhea, but then it leaves them open to getting it more again later. So diet, that was just the first one. Diet shift, certainly, and you've probably seen that in some of your pets, that when you switch them to something different, or they get table scraps, they get something that's different from what they're used to eating, their body doesn't adapt that quickly. And that's one reason why we recommend always, if you're starting a new diet, or if you want to introduce some treats or something like that into their life, Start with a teeny amount and go really slowly in order to get their digestive system to adapt to it. And chronic disease, any chronic disease, and it may be that, which came first, the dysbiosis, did the chronic disease create the dysbiosis, or did the dysbiosis create the chronic disease? We don't know, but we want to correct the dysbiosis. And so we can then hopefully get a handle on the chronic disease. Chronic disease could be chronic GI issues. It could be something, even things like diabetes, or it could be arthritis, or skin problems, or epilepsy. We're now understanding that there is a really strong connection between the gut and the brain and the rest of the body. And we're learning that by addressing the gut, we can actually address many problems that are in other parts of the body. Stress itself can actually lower, change the microflora and create dysbiosis. Certainly, parasites, would be an easy to understand why that might do that as well. Um, I borrowed this picture from another PowerPoint by someone else. It's lovely. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on, kind of what we're dealing with. And the bowel is really very complicated. And these are the cells that line the bowel, and they've got these little projections. They call them villi. And what these projections do is they increase the surface area so you get better absorption of nutrients. And then here you can see between the cells, this is what I was talking about with when I mentioned leaky gut early in my talk, is that these cells are very tightly connected to each other. But things like drugs and stress and infection can cause these tight junctions, which is what they call them, to get looser. And so then things that are inside the intestine can then leak into the circulation of the body. These are immune cells down here. But covering the bowel is this mucus layer. It's protective, and it's called the glycocalyx. And in this mucus layer, it has microbes in it. That's where the microbiome pretty much lives. But it also, it contains antibodies like what they call secretory IgA, which is really the first antibody line of defense, in the body as well. So this kind of sets it up to get you have kind of more of a visual understanding, of what we're dealing with. And as it says here, it's a selective barrier. It absorbs nutrients and helps to keep unwanted invaders out as long as the structure, supports that function. Then the microbiome are these literally trillions of beneficial microbes, and they're not just bacteria. They can be fungal elements, yeasts, they can be protozoa. And get this, there's actually more bugs in your bowel than there are cells in your body. And so they really think in many ways that the microbiome is another organism that lives inside your body, that you live symbiotically with, that it supports you and you support it. And it turns out it's a very, very important organism or organ of the body. And so these beneficial microbes and not such beneficial microbes, they live here in the mucus layer. And and so that's kind of where the microbiome is. When things destroy the protective mucus layer, like we have people that have gastritis, they have GERD, and oftentimes there's problems with the mucus layer being produced. For instance, when you have liver problems, the liver is responsible for creating the mucus. So if the liver's not working so well, you're not going to have such good mucus in there. And oftentimes people who do have liver problems complain that they also have gastritis. And even some drugs can interfere with that mucus layer as well. Even things like Pepsid, which could be good for a couple of days, but if you keep using it over and over again, loses its effectiveness and may actually cause problems. So, so anyway, and then as I'm saying, your gut is connected to the rest of your body, and we know there's a brain gut response. Maybe some of you have eaten foods that made you feel really good. Then again, maybe some of you eaten foods that give you brain fog. They don't make you feel good. Why is that? Well, maybe it's molecules in the food that go to your brain, but more likely it's the food that's altering the bacteria in your microbiome, and then the bacteria sends signals to your brain that can make it foggy or can make it alert. And we'll show you a study at the end here where adjusting the microbiome in a number of dogs that had cognitive disorders, they had senior senility. They couldn't find the dog door. That by altering the microbiome, we were able to improve their cognitive function. That's that brain gut connection. Certainly looking at the immune system, supporting the skin. The skin has its own microbiome, and then supporting the heart and the muscles as well. So every part of the body is really connected to this microbiome, in the gut. So a term that you may not be familiar with, but I've mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again, are prebiotics. Prebiotic is basically fiber, and it's fiber that can be found from a variety of sources. Certainly, eating our vegetables provides us with really good fiber. Mushrooms, that's one of their biggest pluses, is they've got two types of really good fiber in them. One of the type, and I've spoken about the value of mushroom fiber in prior talks. It has both the chitin, which is a very indigestible type of fiber that the bacteria in your bowel will digest and turn into glucosamine-like compounds that help to improve the leaky gut problem. But it also contains beta-glucans, which are also indigestible fiber, and the beta-glucans have an active effect on your immune system, on the immunocytes that live in your bowel, and helps the immunocytes to regulate the good bugs versus the bad bugs. And then you've got fibers that come from plants, things that we think about like slippery elm or marshmallow root that are considered to be demulcents. They have fiber that's very soothing. Psyllium is a very soothing fiber coming from a plant, and it also is subject to digestion. All of these fibers are subject to digestion by the bugs in the bowel. And when the bugs digest or ferment the fiber in the bowel, it creates these compounds that are called short chain fatty acids. And these are very small little fatty acids. Now, fatty acids could be very long chain. We have long chain fatty acids in fish oil, and we have medium chain fatty acids in coconut oil, for instance. But these really short chain fatty acids are produced from the fermentation of fiber, and they feed the cells that line our colon. And they're the most effective way of improving the health of the colon is by feeding them with these short chain fatty acids. And certainly whole food sources as well. Cereal grains, have a lot of bran in them. Oat bran we know is really good. So the prebiotics are a really important part of improving and maintaining the health of the microbiome. And it's a known fact that in the United States, humans eat way too little fiber. We all are supposed to eat a whole lot more than we do. And it's not that much different than our dogs. Many of them, are maybe eating raw meat diets, or diets that don't have a lot of extra fiber in them. And so it's important that we add fiber to their diets. From Ollie, I mentioned, last week we were talking about Ollie's diet. Ollie gets flaxseed meal, which is a great source of fiber. It's also a great source of omega-3s and detoxicant lignans. Ollie also gets some psyllium fiber. He gets a bunch of mushrooms. So he's getting a lot of different sources. Today, we've got in our garden, we've got a bunch of zucchini. He really likes the zucchini. So I just grate it up for him. He eats the whole zucchini. He loves it. So that's really good for his microbiome. And and what and the fiber will also help to feed a variety of different organisms in the microbiome, because one of the hallmarks that we look for in a healthy microbiome is what we call richness. And richness means that there's a lot of different microorganisms. And that allows some redundancy, because one microorganism might be, two or three microorganisms might be good at something, and one may be better than another. So you get all these different ways of helping to improve the health, not just depending upon one single species of microbiome. Okay. So, and then mushrooms, like, yeah, I'm the mushroom guy. I can't not talk about them. And, these are three mushrooms that have great fiber in them, but all mushrooms have really good fiber. And all the pet products that I design from real mushrooms, we use a special extract of mushrooms that's higher in fiber, specifically so it can feed the microbiome. And lion's mane, we've got a good we don't have enough studies in our pets, but we have one lion's mane study. I've probably shown it here before, where they gave the powdered lion's mane mushroom, they added it on top of kibble. Now, kibble is generally kind of crappy food. It's overly processed and it contains a lot of carbohydrates. The processing can create molecular changes in the food that creates toxic elements there. But the microbiome was tested for this kibble food first, and then the lion's mane was added to it with these dogs, and it actually improved the microbiome, even in the face of them eating crappy kibble. So, these fibers, as I mentioned, they really improve this microbial fermentation. And this is really one of the reasons why I think mushrooms are a great tool to use on a daily basis for the microbiome, for the immune system, for so many reasons, cognitive function, as we've been discussing. So let's talk about what do we do about it? Hopefully, I've convinced you that this is pretty important stuff, at this point in time. So, what are the five pillars of microbiome restorative therapy, MBRT? And the first is nutrition. You are what you eat. And this is one reason I spent the last, was it 4 months, 3 or 4 months, talking about diets, talking about how to create a good quality diet. Obviously, the gold standard would be, from scratch homemade food that's been properly, designed for the specifics of your animal. Whether they're just using nutritional science or they're looking at food and energetics as in a TCM standpoint. But not everyone has the time, energy, motivation, budget to do home prepared diets. So we also talked about how there's compromises, that you can still, you can maybe feed one or two homemade meals a week. Maybe you could purchase, some pre-made, really good quality foods, such as we have available through our partnerships with several other companies, and maybe, push comes to shove, you got to feed them kibble because that's how your lifestyle is. I mean, Ollie gets kibble every once in a while too. It's not going to kill them to get it once or twice if everything else is going into their system is good stuff. The body, unless you're really ill, the body has tools to deal with a lot of those toxins, as long as we can, not overwhelm the body with too many toxins and we keep well hydrated. Speaking of hydration, water. Good quality water, and a lot of it is really important. 70% of our bodies is water. And in the dog aging study, which is a great thing that we've done. We've got human aging studies, we've got a dog aging study. They found out that one of the hallmarks of aging in the dog that's different than the hallmarks of aging in humans is hydration. Dogs are generally underhydrated. Now, I think that's because they're eating that crappy kibble, which is like 10% water, as compared to fresh food that's 70 to 80% water. But nonetheless, it's important to make sure your critter is drinking as much water as you can, whether that means taking some bone broth and using that to flavor water to encourage them to drink, or if you do like I do with Ollie, I don't just, whatever I'm feeding him, I put a bunch of water into it. So he's drinking a soup. He stays well hydrated, every day. And people comment at 11 years of age, his hair coat is so soft and smooth. Part of it's the hydration. A part of it is that he gets a lot of fatty acids, in his daily meals. Exercise is so important for all of us, supporting our metabolic health and stress resilience. It's good for the mind. It's good for the spirit and the soul. You wouldn't think about that as something that necessarily is good for the bowel, but it is, and so not much more to say about that. But you don't have to do a lot, and you want to watch it with the older guys, as far as not overdoing it and creating an injury. So you need to, do exercise that's consistent with their musculoskeletal condition. But a little bit everyday movement is so important for so many reasons. And then, the supplementation, that's an area of great expertise that I have. And we talk about the use of mushrooms. I think mushrooms are great to use. We talk about probiotics, probiotic can help to feed the microbiome. Maybe, yeah, and maybe not quite as as effectively as we had been thinking, because there really are there are certain types of probiotics which seem to be working better. And right now, there's a lot of development in that field regarding finding probiotics that have a positive effect on the microbiome. So they're able to do studies where they design a probiotic and then they test the microbiome of the stool to see that it is benefiting it or not. Certainly nutraceuticals, I mentioned, that mushrooms get digested into a form of glucosamine called N-acetyl D-glucosamine, but you can also give N-acetyl D-glucosamine as a pill, as a powder, as a nutraceutical. And then the last thing here is something we're not really going to talk an awful lot about in this session, but next month we're going to continue this conversation and we're going to talk about FMT, which is fecal microbiome transfer. And we talked about in the very beginning when I showed you the slides, about the humans from Australia that had ulcerative colitis and were given, they call it human probiotic infusion, which really is, retention enemas of human feces that's been created into a liquid slurry. Well, these days in veterinary clinics in all across the country, many veterinarians are finding that they can make use of their clinic dog's stool, especially if their clinic dog's already been tested for parasites and tested for bacterial species, especially if the clinic dog is being fed a good diet, because diet really has a strong influence on the microbiome. And we're finding that dogs that are raw fed tend to have better quality, stronger microbiomes, let's say, than dogs that aren't. There's even some evidence that plant-based diets may create a healthier microbiome than, strictly animal-based diets. But it's not for it's there. Not every practice in the country provides this, and there may not be one near you. But there are other ways of doing it. For instance, there are now capsules that are being made up that contain this freeze-dried stool that are that are less temperature sensitive, than the feces can be, that can be given on an oral basis. And the studies that I'm going to show at the end, well, one of the studies, they used the capsules to improve cognitive function. So a lot of ways to get there, diet, water, exercise, of course, good quality air. And then, the last piece is detoxification, and I mentioned that, with leaky, that we consume so much food in a lifetime and everything that we consume isn't always nutrients and that many of them are toxins. They could be irritating to the GI lining. They could affect the liver. They could increase oxidative stress in the body. And they could also, the toxins could affect immune system function as well. So we also need to have a system of detoxification, and many of these toxins, the first place they go from the digestive tract is through the portal vein to the liver, and it's on purpose because the liver is supposed to detoxify these things. But the liver only has so much capacity to detoxify, and it has like all these seats, but there are these sites where the toxins sit and then get detoxified. And so if the seats are all full, then the toxins will float around the bloodstream. And the first phase in liver detoxification actually creates increased toxicity in the metabolites that are created. So then you have to go to the second phase. So there's things that you can use to improve liver detoxification that are herbal, like maybe you've heard of milk thistle, which is a great detoxicant. It helps to promote the second stage of liver detoxification, which helps to reduce these circulating toxins in the body. So these are the basic 5 pillars that we want to look at. And the nutrition's pretty simple. You've been given instructions, and you can go back and look at some of my past hours that we've done this. Water, that's pretty simple. We want to provide the best water possible, whether you have a filter on your system or reverse osmosis or you get it bottled. I mean, these days we're concerned about microplastics, so we have to look at what the containers are that contain the water, because they can have the microplastics in them. Exercise, well, that's something just you need to just plan in your day to do that. And then supplementation, hopefully you have a veterinarian or I can help you with this as far as what might be the best way to supplement your pet in terms of what your budget is and what is available and what your interests are. Some people they can't stand mushrooms. I don't want to use mushrooms. Ew, So, we'll find something else that works. There's a lot of different things we can do that work. And then likewise, detoxification kind of goes under the supplementation, but another form of detoxification is avoidance. Look at what's going into the animal's mouth. Look at where they're spraying herbicides and pesticides. Even your neighbor that might be spraying and you're not, if there's wind drift, it could get over to your property. So, being aware of when the spraying happens and keeping your animal inside or walking it out the back door and taking other ways is also a form of detoxification by avoiding the toxins themselves. Okay. So, well, let me talk about this a little more if I haven't talked about it too much already. Um, the integrative approach, we want to balance the gut microbiome by optimizing nutrition and diet. This would be prebiotics, the fiber that we've mentioned, probiotics, the appropriate probiotics. Right now, the one that I'm most focused on is readily available through human outlets as well, called Saccharomyces boulardii. It's a yeast-based probiotic. It's not temperature sensitive, and it's gotten some very good studies in dogs and cats showing its ability to reverse antibiotic stimulated diarrhea and small intestine bacterial overgrowth and other problems, including and leaky gut as well. I mentioned the oral poop caps, and that's something that we can discuss. And I'm looking to add those on to the Well Pet Dispensary inventory, so it's something you can avail yourself of. And then fecal microbiome transfer, which would have to be done in a veterinary office. And remember, mushrooms are powerful tools. So detoxification support, looking at milk thistle, looking at ways to enhance kidney function, and certainly just drinking more water helps the kidneys to remove more toxins. And the skin, sometimes brushing your dog, giving them shampoos and baths, in non-toxic shampoos that aren't too drying are ways because they will release toxins through their skin. And so if we can cleanse them that way, we can get, they don't get reabsorbed. Certainly, the lungs are an important way that we release toxins, and certainly lymphatics, looking at massage. Canine massage is a great way to get lymphatic drainage, and certainly GI tract as far as the food we're feeding and things like clay, for instance, the calcium aluminosilicate clay that we have in our RX clay product actually binds up many of these toxins in the GI tract. So, and then you want to support whole body health, certainly looking at their emotional health, their behavioral health, and we can work on environmental enrichment. So many of our pets stay home alone while we're off working to earn enough money to pay for their expensive food and everything else. So, we want to look at that. And we've discussed environmental enrichment in prior sessions as well, and you can probably find that information on our YouTube channel. Um, Behavioral retraining, yeah, sometimes you can do it yourself, but believe me, it's so much better if you have a third party come in and look at what's going on with your dog and look what's going on with you and tell you what are the cues that you're giving your dog that are creating that kind of behavior and retraining yourself at the same time as you're retraining your dog. Good idea. And there are supplements as well. That can also help with behavioral health. Like we know mushrooms and cannabis promote something called synaptic plasticity. And the synapses in the brain, when they're fixed, you have a fixed behavior problem. But if you make them more plastic and kind of rearrange them, that's when the body can relearn things and learn things better. We know that's a mechanism that helps us get over PTSD, for instance. So And then, non-invasive therapies to enhance whole body health. Acupuncture is a great one, even acupressure, and if you have a canine massage therapist, they can show you how to do it. Maybe we'll have a guest on one of these days to give us a little lesson on acupressure for dogs. Chiropractic is something that is very can be very helpful for whole body health. The low level laser, we've talked about the pulsed electromagnetic force. Ozone therapy is turning out to be really a great tool to use. And the ozone, we think of ozone as a toxic gas, but when it's applied in a medical context, it actually stimulates the body to produce more antioxidants and to reduce inflammation. So it needs to be administered, through specific routes. We give it rectally, we can give it in fluids subcutaneously, we can even put it in water and have them drink the water. We can ozonate glycerin or ozonate olive oil. So there's a lot of ways we can get that. And massage therapy, it's great, and even if you don't have your own canine massage therapist like I do, or like Ollie does, it's just kind of it's just really an advanced form of petting and moving things along, and that connection, is also involves, that bond that you have with your pet when you put your hands on them. And then, it may be that with everything we're doing that we're still having problems, and that's when we look at doing some testing. Some vets want to test up front. I'm kind of more like, let's do the good stuff first. Let's do the easy stuff first, see how it goes. Unless you've got a really critical type of disease that we really need to intervene as soon as possible. So we do blood tests, we do hair and blood analysis. We can find out about vitamin, mineral, fatty acid, are we getting enough fish oil, for this animal. We have dosages that we use, but there's such a biochemical individuality with each animal that sometimes it's better to test to make sure what you're doing, even if you're using the most advanced dosing scheme, is being effective for that individual animal. All right, so let me talk about these two studies as we're kind of winding down on this teachy topic here. And there was and these were studies that were published in, a very conventional journal from the American Veterinary Medical Association. And cognitive function, I've talked about improving cognitive function through the use of lion's mane. And lion's mane has molecules in it that we think these molecules, get absorbed by the gut and go to the brain and have a direct effect on the brain, and on the peripheral nervous system. But probably even more so is the effect that lion's mane has on this gut-brain axis. When I mentioned, that we've used that lion's mane was in a study with pet kibble, showing improvement in the microbiome. And this is kind of where I was referring to before when I said, I'm sure you've had a meal and you've got, oh, man, I feel really good, or you had another meal and you're like, oh, I'm so brain fogged, and this is really what I'm talking about, this gut-brain axis. Anyway, they 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 started with 10 dogs, but they only were able to finish with six, and that's not uncommon with studies. And they had defined diagnosed cognitive dysfunction, and they were given these oral FMT capsules for 90 days. That's 3 months, and I think depending on the weight of the animal, it could be one capsule, it could be two capsules, it could be three capsules. Right now, I'm giving Ollie these capsules that were created by my friend and colleague Margot Roman, who I believe is on tonight, which is cool. We'll maybe introduce her a little later. And so, and I'm, and we haven't done microbiome testing, so I'm not seeing any benefits there, but he does seem to be a little bit happier, and he does look forward to getting his cream cheese with his oral FMT capsule every day. But in this group, in this study, these dogs all showed not only the cognitive dysfunction, but clear evidence of dysbiosis. And at the end of the 90 days, they were retested and their microbiome had changed to beneficial microbial species. Now, each dog had their own unique microbiome, and the changes in each dog in terms of the species were also different, but they all had the same result in terms of five out of the six dogs had measurable improvement in cognitive function. So, it's something to look at. Absolutely. And there's even studies that show there's a value for microbiome restorative therapy for epilepsy. The epilepsy, in fact, may be more gut related than anything else. We've learned that Parkinson's could be gut related, and there's certain types of epilepsy which are very resistant to therapy, and that maybe that's because they haven't addressed the gut yet. Okay. And then this one is just amazing. It just blew my mind. And these were puppies that had parvovirus. And this was published in JAVMA, the Journal of American Veterinary Medical Association, which is the most conservative and most respected and one of the oldest veterinary journals out there. And the results were so spectacular. I mean, these are puppies that have they're hospitalized. They have parvovirus. Parvovirus, in a puppy can be a terminal event because they just basically poop their guts out and die from dehydration, die from blood loss. Parvovirus is a virus that affects the bowel that actually winds up killing a lot of the cells that line the bowel, which is why you get the sloughing of the bowel and the bleeding, and then all kinds of electrolyte shifts and things that are bad. So they were all on standard. They were all hospitalized, and they were all on the standard therapy that's used to treat parvovirus when you have a hospitalized dog: IV therapy, electrolytes, antiemetics, probably, maybe some diarrhea medication as well. Probably not antibiotics, by the way. Um, and what they did was they did retention enemas with this fecal slurry that was put up put up the rectum, and then they were and this is pretty almost counterintuitive that a dog with diarrhea would be given a retention enema. Although I had heard about this being done years ago, and honestly, I was very skeptical. I'm kind of a show me the evidence kind of guy. But in this case, the results were so spectacular that they 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 stopped the study and they eliminated the placebo group because they said it was not ethical because they were getting such good results with the treatment group in these parvo puppies. They said it's not ethical to withhold this treatment from the placebo group. So they started giving the treatment to the placebo group as well. At the same time, the study hadn't been completed because they had a certain time period they were going to do, but they published it anyway because they thought the information was so valuable to veterinarians out there that are battling this oftentimes terminal disease. They wanted the information out. So this was really, to me, this is like really impressive. And this is the kind of study that's going to get the interest of veterinarians. It's going to cause more and more veterinarians who are kind of conventional, who may look at some of the stuff we talk about here, go, well, poo-poo, holistic medicine, yeah, but those vets are going to be convinced by this study that it's something that they need to adopt. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it. I just really excited about this study here. So that's kind of the end of my little talk on microbiome. And I wanted to talk about some of the resources that we have available to you. This is kind of the salesy part of my hour. I apologize if I'm not much of a sales guy. But I want to talk to you about what we have available. And these are our microbiome friendly products that are available through our Well Pet dispensary. We have a number of mushroom containing products, almost all of which I have designed, and in particular the two, the Daily Dog and the Functional Feline, one for dogs, one for cats, in my opinion, are really the best of what I have for microbiome restorative therapy. But we also have the three new krill pet products. And krill is zooplankton, and it lives in the pristine ocean around Antarctica. And krill, even though it's tiny little shrimp-like creatures that are microscopic, are food for whales and very good food. They're very rich in omega-3 fatty acids like we see in fish oil. They're very rich in something called phospholipids and choline. And choline is really good for the nervous system. The phospholipids are really good for the digestive system, for the bowel. And it's also rich in a red algae-based antioxidant called astaxanthin. So the lion's mane, and I think any mushroom is good for the microbiome, but we do have that one study in dogs for lion's mane. We've got studies in laboratory animals with turkey tail, for instance, but combining the lion's mane with the krill meal, I think, is also a very strong microbiome friendly approach. The Daily Dog has the krill meal in it. It also and functional feline, they're both almost identical. They've got 8 different mushrooms. They've got ashwagandha, adaptogens, astragalus root, which is a Chinese herb good for the digestive system. They have detoxicants. They've got the milk thistle. They've got cracked cell chlorella. Um, they have nutritional yeast. And let me get a little drink of water here. And they have the Saccharomyces boulardii, that probiotic that I was mentioning. So I think they're really great products for the microbiome, and it's all in one, keeps it easy, as far as providing that. Maybe not enough fiber. We might want to add additional fiber through the diet, that sort of thing. Or maybe add, a single species of mushroom. If let's say your pet, has some problems in addition to you wanting to get the microbiome in better shape, maybe it's got some immune system problems. So you might want to bring in the turkey tail. Let's say it's got some allergy problems. We've mentioned how the Pet Defenders contains reishi and chaga, both which have terpenes that have antihistaminic effects by stabilizing mast cell membrane. So, maybe they've got kidney issues and we want to bring the cordyceps in larger amounts and it's available. And all of those have good levels of fiber in them. And then we've got, our daily wellness and digestive health supplements. These are all products that I have also formulated 25 years ago for RX vitamins, the Ultra EFA fish oil, which contains not just the marine lipids that come from Norwegian salmon and mackerel, but it also has lecithin, which is the phospholipids, the phosphatidylcholine, which I was mentioning is also good in the krill meal. The Nutrigest is an herbal formula that has very strong anti-inflammatory herbs. And RX Biotic is a lactobacillus high potency probiotic. It's human derived, it's not pet derived. The RX Zyme is my digestive formula. Actually forgot to put in there the RX Clay, which is our clay formula. And although we use the clay formula for diarrhea, it also, in smaller amounts, helps to regulate and enhance that mucus layer that I mentioned is overlays the bowel. So I probably should put that in there too. Um, and then, as we mentioned, we've got some partners now. So if you're interested in looking at not having to provide the food yourself and your budget works for this because they're not inexpensive, but they are high quality, you could look to order some of those foods, through our website or go directly through them. I think through our website you get a bit of a discount and we get a little bit of a kickback, to be honest. But these are really good diets. We're feeding our cats the goodness gracious. They seem to like that the most. Ollie doesn't care. He likes we tried the raised right in the kitties. It has some spearmint leaf, and our kitties don't like spearmint, but Ollie loves it. Um, and then we talked about, preparing the meals yourself, and we have tools that can help you to support the calcium, provide calcium, the canine minerals or feline minerals. My nutritional support for dogs and cats is really one of my favorite formulas. Ollie gets a lot of it every day, and it's got flaxseed meal, and it's got kelp powder in it, and it's got a bunch of green foods and burdock root and herbs and liver meal. It's really tasty and really works really well. And then flaxseed meal. You can buy flaxseed meal at the supermarket. Keep it in the refrigerator because flaxseed meal deteriorates really quickly. And then, the nutrient profile is really important, for your animal. And in most cases, we're going to downsize the carbs because the carbs kind of feed the bad bugs in the bowel. And we're going to, up the up the protein, but not huge unless there's a need for that, and up the fats, healthy fats, and up the fiber. Those are what we really want to do. That's kind of the best kind of diet if you're doing it yourself, or if you're looking for a diet like that you can purchase, then that's already been made for you. Look for those characteristics. So, and then we're still doing bundles, aren't we, Haley? Yeah, we're just trying to make it easier for you it's another way of providing a discount. And these are pictures of the functional feline and the daily dog, which I think are great for MBRT. And then we have our 3 other krill pet formulas, highly palatable. We finally can give mushrooms to cats pretty easily. I couldn't say all cats, but many cats will like it quite a bit. Here we have our healthy diets that can be delivered to your door. Check them out on our website under partners. And the Chi Dog is raw food formulated to match TCVM energetics. The Evermore and the others are all gently cooked food. Chi Dog and Chi Cat are raw food, although I think the Chi Cat is gently cooked too, but only at 165 degrees Fahrenheit, so a lot of the enzymes aren't destroyed. Um, and they're all very good foods and raised right. And goodness gracious, they have also specialized some of these diets to be more directed towards some disease issues like kidney or liver, things like that. So check them out. Um, and I do believe Margot is on our call here, and Margot's just written a book. Margot attended my talk where I spoke about that I showed those slides at the very beginning, about treating ulcerative colitis with fecal infusion, and from that she was inspired. She now is really the really smart person when it comes to the microbiome. She has more experience than anyone I know. She's got great cases in this book, and she created that term, microbiome restorative therapy. I owe a lot to her for learning from her, just as she says she has a lot to learn from me. There's a scan tag there. It's not in print yet, but there you go. So now we're up to Ask Doc Anything Now. So how are we doing, Haley, as far as questions? Did you prepare them like little banners so I don't get confused when they're really long? Because
Yeah,
I'm
are you able to see this here?
not, no, I can't. I think I have to,
Oh, maybe if you're still sharing, or did you already stop yours?
I'll stop my share.
Okay.
There we go. All right. So, what do you think about the fecal transplants? And fecal transplants are what we call the fecal microbiome transfer, and pills available for dogs with severe reflux, bloody diarrhea, and gastro issues. I think especially when you're, hang on, I think especially when you're dealing with these kinds of severe GI issues. I mean, look at the study I just showed you, with the parvovirus. So I think it's a good idea. And why don't we ask Margot? Margot, why don't you weigh
Oh,
in
thank
and
you
say
so
say
much
hi to all
for
the folks?
thank you everybody for looking at this issue because it is so important. Because if 80% of your immune system comes from your gut, and to think that dogs have been self-medicating forever and eating poop and doing it, I started doing it for all of those issues for bloody diarrhea and gastrointestinal issues, and we're resolving diarrhea that others would take days to do in hours. On the parvo piece, I did a parvo case in 2013 and presented at NABC with 30 dogs, and gave fecal transplants and ozone and homeopathic for parvo. And all survived except the ones that didn't get it. And one of them that was almost dead turned around in about 2.5 hours and was wanting to eat. So it is truly a miracle. But the fecal transplants for severe reflux works all the time. And so having the knowledge to know where to increase the microbiome terrain, and the products that Rob talks about are those products that really feed those microbes and balance it. And I have a whole protocol for the microbiome restorative therapy that we do, which does include using ozone to get rid of the biofilm, and that reduces the need to you get that biofilm away, which is this kind of like slime that's there that won't let the new microbes go into their new spaces. But it's slam dunk for GI, for all those severe reflux, bloody diarrhea. I've had clients spending $30,000 at referral hospitals, and in 3 days giving them the fecal transplant and the ozone, they're normal, and the people are like, they can't believe it. And so, like, I had two dogs that had severe issues that basically, and mostly it's usually I get it done and it's done, but these dogs were almost dead when they came in, and one of them passed away and about 4 months ago, and lived 8.5 years after they said there was nothing they could do for the dog. And it had constant severe reflux, didn't have as much bloody diarrhea, but always had diarrhea, and was just always swallowing and burping and miserable. And she got a piece of poop every day, and she was fine. So it's wonderful.
Nice. Well, Mario, let's keep going through the questions. If you have something to add, let us know, okay? Because it's great. It's so I'm so honored to have you join us. And we're going to do the same topic next month, but we're going to also there's some I've gotten involved with a company and I want to talk with you about how what we're doing with the company can be a very easy way for you to help improve your dog's microbiome. And maybe Margot can join us then as well. But stay tuned. I just people have questions and I want to make sure that we honor the questions. Okay, next one. Since the microbiome affects so much of the body, I suspect there may be many indicators when the microbiome is out of balance. But are there specific symptoms or indicators of dysbiosis to look for, and are there tests that may identify or diagnose it? So there certainly we can look at going ahead with many of these approaches to create a terrain, as Margot uses the word, for the microbiome, basically a healthy environment for the microbiome to flourish. But when we do have disease that we need to address, or if you want to be sure that your animal's microbiome is healthy enough, and maybe you need to add something to it to get it healthier, then what we do is we test the stool. And there's several tests that are available. And what I'm going to be talking about in a month is a test that I'm responsible for. That's a fourth testing approach. And so, looking at the test, looking at the different types of organisms that are in there, they have a number of different parameters that they use with these tests, including a dysbiosis index. And that's how we figure it out. We start there with that fecal testing. And people, you walk your dog every day. Every day you're picking the poop up anyway, it's just custom built to take that poop and with this test that I'm involved with, you just stick a little Q-tip in it and you put it in a jar and mail it off. So yes, those are the tests that we would do to specifically identify what we would need to do for your dog's issues or for its health to keep it healthy. I like the preventative approach to try to get them healthy so they don't develop these diseases. But in many cases, we're coming in late and we've got to get started somewhere. Okay. Next question. My dog eats a very high quality commercial, gently cooked diet from Canada. In March, she participated in a research study for a popular microbiome company here in the US. She took one of their newer gut rebuilding products. During the last 2 weeks of the study, she had bad diarrhea and her post-study microbiome test had extremely elevated E. coli, much higher than the upper normal range. Pre-study was normal. Any suggestions to decrease the E. coli? I will not use any products for this company ever again, nor will I consult with them. So, Margot, would you like to work on this one? Since you have so much more experience than me, but I'm learning, I'm an eager student.
So, you know, I'm going to be very, very honest. If you can start with the healthiest microbiome that you can find and just try to reboot and then see what happens, and just like you were being conservative but to know the details of the microbiome so that you can follow it is always better. But doing, again, our dogs, just to pitch up my dogs, is they are 30 years, 7 generations that never have had antibiotics and never had pesticides. And I make their food all organic, fresh, and it's predominant plant with about 10% animal protein that's all organic. So they were 15 years of only raw based food, raw meat, and then I switched over to more plant, and the results have been really amazing. So I that's where if they have a high E. coli range, giving them a fecal transplant from dogs who have been in balance for years, to me is like the easiest thing to do because like I said, dogs eat poop
And,
anyway.
and so Margot and I actually have a meeting tomorrow, and we're going to figure out how we can carry her stuff from her dogs, her 7 generations of dogs that have never had antibiotics on the website here. So you can do the oral FMT, which some people say isn't as powerful, as the actual retention enemas, but sometimes it's the best you can get, or it's a good place to start, before you get into the invasive stuff. But I think that's, and we kind of know the study the company you're referring to, and I think Margot, they originally used your stuff, and then they went to a kind of a less expensive source, didn't they?
Yeah, so we were the first. I'm going to be honest. I pioneered the using it for medical conditions in animals, 14 years ago, and we started providing it. And actually, the dysbiosis index from Texas A&M is based on my dog's microbiome. But because they were raw fed, it was never really published with us our information.
Yeah, because
So, but
conventional mainstream thinks that raw feeding is like the devil, when in
yeah,
fact
and I just
this would have proven how good really is.
exactly. And I was just reading the FMT consortium that they had, and they said that animals can't be raw fed. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're taking the best of the donors and saying, don't use them because we want dogs that have only been off antibiotics at least 6 months. Mine have had been on antibiotics in 30 years. So, well, not the dogs, but 7 generations. So, you lose microbiome every time you go on an antibiotic or an NSAID or a flea product. Brevecto and all of those Simparica, they kill the microbiome. They're especially these ones that they're on 24/7. You think the microbiome ever can fight something that kills all these parasites? So it's a delicate thing, and if you can reboot it with something that has been deliberately protected for 30 years, it's got to have a lot more kick to it. So finding this E. coli, and we all have E. coli, we all have C. diff, we all have C. perfringens, we all have all of these bacteria, we probably all have Giardia, we all have parasites, but it's when it gets out of control and the animals is just chronically having terrible diarrhea and soft stools or malabsorption or whatever. That's when you want to change things around. But the easiest thing is doing the MBRT, which is you know building the terrain, using ozone to break down the biofilm, and giving the highest quality fecal donor. And again, we have it in capsules, we have it in slurries, and we have it frozen in capsules, which is much more delicate, and it needs to be sent on dry ice, which makes it a lot more you know critical on the temperature and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of stuff that has so many different products, and if Rob is going to carry it, then the freeze dried is the easiest because there doesn't have to
And
be
we'll
this.
start there and see what kind of interest there is in it. And if it looks like there's a lot of interest, we'll look to see how we can get some of the stronger stuff in there. But it's a good place to start. I mean, that one study showed benefit even with that. Let's move on to the next question. Looks like we've got a few. Are there any mushroom products that would be beneficial for a dog with delayed gastric emptying? So, I would say if you're looking for an approach to delayed gastric emptying, I would suggest instead the herb ginger root, because that's what ginger root does, is it increases peristalsis, the contractions of the stomach. That's one way it winds up being an antiemetic in that it promotes the movement of digestion from the mouth, down in through the system. But mushroom product that's specifically for that specific problem, I would reach for an herb. And you can use the ginger root that you have on your spice rack as well, and maybe try mixing quarter teaspoon maybe with 2 ounces of warm water, and see if you can get it into your dog. Or you can also just mix the ginger root with some food, if they're eating it. I also would, you also might want to look at what you're feeding. It may be that the food itself is more difficult for your dog to pass and to transit, what the nutrient profile is. We know that some nutrient profiles, do delay gastric emptying. But that would be my answer for that one. Do you have a suggestion, Margot? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
since you're here.
we do oral microbiome not in the capsules, but get it so it opens up in the stomach. So usually I'm trying to get the microbiome deeper into the duodenum and into in the jejunum or ileum, but I'd love to get it all in the ileum because that's where all the Peyer's patches are and all the immune cells are. But giving them oral microbiome, which is we also have our dogs water bowl water. So my dogs in 30 years, 7 generations, have never had one piece of plaque or tartar or gingivitis or recessed gum, and the same thing on my cats. I've never brushed any animal's teeth in my house. So that oral, which there's 400 to 700 species in the mouth alone, and that swallowing is going into the stomach. So obviously, if the animal is not downstream into the stomach doesn't work the way it should. So using the oral microbiome water, as well as the as capsules or pieces that are in the stomach and getting churned around and in the bacteria of the stomach, which there are thousands of those too. And so, how do you know which species gets through and gets all the way down to the colon? And that's why we often do the oral microbiome through the water bowl water, and then go to a piece that's more going to break up in the stomach, and then do capsules that are double walled and triple walled. So, and then do the rectal fecal transplant. And I don't think we have to do that on everybody, but we have really a sick animal that can't seem to is constantly having the nausea and the burping and the inability to empty their stomach. It really does work because you're giving the precursors of neurotransmitters in the microbiome, and if they don't have the species that have that, then they're not going to be able to repair themselves.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next one. In pets with severe I like that we're getting these are really good questions. Thanks,
They're
gang.
really good. We should get these questions to.
Well,
Good.
we have them.
Yeah.
In pets with severe dysbiosis, I experienced my own with my own dog. The MBRT delivered as a rectally administered slurry produced more meaningful improvement than the MBRT oral capsules. Recognize that many pet parents don't have access to a veterinarian who offers that procedure. Do you find the MBRT capsules still beneficial with the understanding the improvement may be slower or less pronounced? And I don't have that clinical experience. From what I've been from talking with other vets that do, it generally is recognized that the strongest response comes from the fresh stool, that is then applied by retention enema. But again, not everyone has access to that, access to a veterinarian. And so, and again, we did see some results in that one published study with cognitive function. So I think sometimes, you have any port in a storm, sometimes you have to do, what all that there is that can do. But I'm going to try to do some talking with some local veterinarians here in the Boulder area to see if anybody's doing this kind of work, or if, I don't know that I have the bandwidth to do it myself, although I'd love to. But yeah, I think, and like I said, when that study, gets out amongst the veterinary population on the parvovirus, I think you're going to see a lot more of these tight sphinctered conventional vets who poo-poo about all the holistic medicine starting to offer it themselves. And and every veterinarian, they've got a clinic dog, they've got their own dog. I mean, they have such a readily available of what could be a good quality stool if they would feed them right. But Margot and I are going to talk about what we can do to make this something that we can offer to you in home. Maybe there's a way we can figure out a cheaper way to ship the actual the fresh fecal capsules, frozen fecal capsules, online. But to begin with, we'll start with the freeze dried capsules and do that. Next question. I hope this is not spinning. Okay. I've also experienced, this is probably the same person,
It
ozone
is.
saline being used to deliver slurry-based MBRT, partially to help disrupt biofilms. Are there any mushrooms that help disrupt biofilms, either in preparation for MBRT or potentially to improve the effectiveness of MBRT capsules? I don't have the answer for that. I would think that a mushroom such as chaga, for instance, which is really rich in these triterpenes, which are these hydrocarbons that could penetrate um, lipophilic substances, because the biofilms aren't just water soluble; they have a lot of fatty type of nature to them, which helps to prevent things getting through. But I don't know that there's a study that has observed that or measured that. I'm really shooting from the hip. I think reishi and chaga both, or individually, either one of them would be what I would reach for when it comes to that. That's a great question. Thank you. What herbal pain relief can be recommended for an arthritic, nearly 10-year-old spayed German Shepherd with a history of allergies and GI problems, probably leaky gut? I don't think she could tolerate white willow bark. She's currently receiving cold laser treatments, glucosamine, and Dord's Beast jump for joints. I get it. She should start underwater treadmill soon. She's a good weight, eats home cooked food, receives low impact exercise plus daily walks in both lion's mane and turkey tail daily. Well, the things that I've had success with, and you're doing a lot of stuff, and it may be that you've reached the point of, diminishing returns, um, and possibly, MBRT or, fecal transplants also can help to reduce systemic inflammation in the body as a whole, which would have a beneficial influence. But in terms of what things I can suggest that I have available, I'm really very fond, for instance, of green-lipped mussel. A lot of the studies just are showing that glucosamine may not be as effective as we had thought it was. I like green-lipped mussel quite a bit. I also like the use of CBD. That's why I have my CBD products. And you might want to look at the Silver Dog Forte chews that have 12 milligrams of CBD, and they also have two mushrooms that have good anti-inflammatory effect, the cordyceps and the lion's mane. Um, but I think you're doing a lot of good stuff, and maybe, we need to look at how you're dosing the lion's mane, maybe dosing the jump for joints, There's also, pulsed electromagnetic force mats, the PEMF, that can be quite good as well. Certainly, I don't see you saying any acupuncture, and acupuncture is a great approach to dealing with that. And I'm going to keep trying to get through the question. Is this the next to the last question?
Yes.
Okay. So, Margot, why don't you speak to the
Yeah,
use of.
because we have been doing the fecal transplant for elder animals that have this same issue, and they are so much better because number one, it's number two, but number one is they actually can absorb all the things that you're giving. So if they don't have the microbial diversity, you can be giving the best herbs and the best supplements, and only a portion of it is actually getting absorbed because they need the it's over 4,000 species that they are talking about. So with older dogs, like I just had a client today who called me who has an older dog who has a large mass under its tongue and under in the hole, and hasn't been able to really eat that much lately, and is depressed and everything else. And we did a fecal transplant and oral microbiome about 4 weeks ago, and I talked to him, and he said it's a different dog. He's running around, and he's tearing up his toys and ripping out the insides and acting like a puppy. And one of the things that we just created in the last 6 months, because I had this litter of puppies, is we decided to do mixology or mix them all together. So we call it 7G, so or G7, so 7 generations in one. So we mix the puppy with the mother, with the grandmother, with the great great grandmother, and mix that all together. So we're getting that young, youthful microbiome that makes these dogs silly. And I did this like 12 or 14 years ago with the puppies, and the dogs were outside playing ball. Like what is hasn't done this since it was 5, and it's
So,
playing ball outside. That's the gut brain connection. It's weird, so amazing.
so I have some of Margot's freeze dried powder for slurry, and I am planning on giving Ollie, that rectal infusion pretty soon. But I
Hmm.
also would like to ask Mary Kennedy, invite Mary Kennedy, who is on here. Mary, I hope you're listening, to unmute yourself. Mary is Ollie's massage therapist, and I'm going to be sharing with her. She'll be helping me do the MBRT on Ollie, and she has her dog Finn has epilepsy, and so we're going to be doing the same thing on Finn as well. But Mary made a comment while Margot was speaking, and I like having this kind of participation, especially with animal health professionals. It's great to have you both here. Thank you so much. But she mentioned, that canine massage is really an important
Yeah.
modality as well. Mary, why don't you speak to that here? Because this is a great opportunity for you to help educate folks about that value.
Well, can you hear me?
Yep, you
Oh,
sound good.
goody. Um, so for animals, just as humans, massage I feel like it's greatly overlooked. Um, you had talked about, moving toxins in the body.
Hmm.
It moves the lymphatic. I mean, I have worked with dogs that have stopped eating and are like on the brink of death, and they come back, and the owner is like, oh my God, like this dog just took me to the edge, and now he's back again. Um, I mean, I've had remarkable results with massage. That said, it's not a silver bullet, but it does so much to move the metabolism,
Mm.
so much to stimulate the appetite, and
Mm.
as well as obviously the joints and
Nice.
everything. Yeah. Yeah.
How long have you been doing massage, Mary?
26 years.
Oh, just a couple of days, huh?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
The
so
best job
a
ever.
bunch of old timers here.
Yep.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And
Yeah.
like I said, I think that, and I was actually referring to you that I would like to at some future time talk about acupressure. Maybe we could do, some sort of a demo, a live demo online here to our following, which is, we've got 40 people that have been stayed on for nearly, an hour and a half. So I really
Hmm.
appreciate everyone's attention. I'm glad that we're creating a nice community here where we can
Yes.
we can share with each other. So
And I
let's.
too, I also want to throw a shout out to Margot because I spoke with her a while back about my dog Finn, who has epilepsy now. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Margot, for all the work that you do.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. This is
Okay.
really cool. It makes me get verklempt here. So what about the next question, number 8? What is this one? Oh, the lipoma question. What can be done to help a 4-year-old golden retriever that has many lipomas? She is hypothyroid also. She eats a raw diet. Is there a mushroom for that? So I see a lot of ads on TikTok, for turkey tail mushroom for lipomas. I don't really believe that it works, quite honestly. Ollie has
Hmm.
a ton of lipomas, and he gets, very high dosages of turkey tail. I have lipomas. I take high dosages of turkey tail, and they're not moving anywhere. But the hypothyroid issue may speak more directly to the lipomas because they're fatty tumors. And I think when you have problems with fat metabolism, either you're obese, you're eating too many fatty foods, or in hypothyroidism, you definitely have fat metabolism issues. I've seen um, um, Andrew Jones, if you know of him. He's a pretty cool guy. He's Canadian. He's got a good following. He's been doing some really cool work. And I've talked with him about lipomas, and he believes that the way to address lipomas is using nutraceuticals that enhance, fat metabolism, like L-carnitine, and looking at the diet, and what you're feeding in the diet, and using healthy fats. So, if a lipoma is interfering with movement, it gets in the way of something, it should be removed. Some lipomas can convert into aggressive tumors called liposarcomas. They're nasty. They need to be dealt with. Um, Raw diet, that's good, but just because it's a raw diet, is it balanced? What is the nutrient profile on it? And is she getting fish oil? Is she getting other supplements? So no, there is not a mushroom that specifically is going to treat lipomas, but there is a mushroom to help with fat metabolism. There is any mushroom will help improve the microbiome health, and I think that looking at the metabolism from a microbiome standpoint could actually be a very successful approach. And I'm going to ask Margot, if she's not on the phone still, what has your experience been with lipomas? You're muted.
Yeah.
You're mu-
It's circulation. So I'll tell you, I've taken courses with human physicians in ozone therapy, and this is just on the side, but there was a whole group of us that were like, we can inject our fat with ozone and it goes away, and it does. The ozone sort of shrinks
Really?
down the lipomas
I'll
and
try
shrinks
that on
down,
Ollie.
you
Yeah.
know, and put some ozone gas right into it, and it does shrink them. And we were, kidding around a bunch of it was. I was the only vet there because I was like afraid to inject myself. But everybody, all these doctors, they're all injecting, but I, injected a bunch of fat on my, on my hips, and my pants fit better the next day. So I was like, okay, so what, I mean, giving ozone systemically, would that help with any kind of stagnation? Because that in Chinese medicine, stagnation of phlegm. When you bring more oxygen in the body, are you getting more movement of circulation in the body? So maybe that might help. Again, most lipomas are benign, but it always concerns people that that it could be something else, and you try to biopsy it, and you end up with irritating it and aggravating it, and so. But I think the fact that the dog is hypothyroid, if there are any other issues that the dog has, whether it's been allergies or it's been GI problems, I screen them for the Pleckner syndrome and look at their IgA, IgG, and and that's like a 2 hour lecture. So, but the hypothyroid, the dog's metabolism needs to be enhanced, and oxygen with ozone does do that. So, giving support with glandulars, with like canine thyroid support or thyrotropin PMG and things like that to really nurture the thyroid versus just medicate the thyroid is another thing I would do.
Cordyceps, by the way, as an adaptogen, and reishi as an adaptogen, they
Mhm.
address the hypothalamic, not just the hypothalamic pituitary axis, but also the hypothalamic thyroid axis. So mushrooms can be beneficial in that regards. And so, Haley, these were the ones that were sent to us by email.
Yes, and then there was one that I'd gotten from the chat as well.
Okay,
That
is that
last
the
one I'd
one?
gotten from the
Is
chat.
that one by Anna Maria? The one
No.
that's the one at the very beginning on laryngeal paralysis.
Oh, one sec. Um,
You got the one on lipomas there,
yes.
and raw goat's milk and fish. Um, Probiotic you mentioned is given. Oh, someone I guess spelled AJ gave the Saccharomyces boulardii to Diva. So why don't I just start with these chat questions too, because I want to talk about laryngeal paralysis.
Yeah, that's the one I did not get to. Oh,
Okay.
yep.
And so Anna Maria says, not on topic. Of course, it's on topic. However, my 12-year-old has been diagnosed with GLOP, which is a form of laryngeal paralysis. I'm not sure what the acronym means. There's so many new acronyms these days. Um, his only current symptom is a slight change in his bark. This is not consistent, but does occur. I've read that lion's mane is helpful for this. Would like Dr. Rob's opinion regarding this, and has he used this with any success in dogs with this issue? So, the laryngeal paralysis, causes could even come from pulling on the collar, could be some trauma to that recurrent laryngeal nerve. Um, I've had, when I was, I've had success using a laser directly on that laryngeal area, which seems to help with the nerve function. But the wonder what that was. But the other approaches I would use, I think lion's mane is a credible approach. I don't have any research on it or clinical experience using it, but it does benefit because it stimulates nerve growth factor and brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It can have a positive influence on nerve regrowth and nerve function. So this is all hypothetical. Um, there's a new product that has just been released by Real Mushrooms that is the lion's mane mycelium, and they call it real mycelium. And it's actually stronger than the lion's mane mushroom when it comes to stimulating the brain-derived neurotrophic factor or the nerve growth factor, which are both big issues when it comes to nerve repair and nerve regrowth. So it's possible that using those two in combination along with the laser could be helpful. CBD also is really great as anti-inflammatory for neurologic issues. And so I would look at that combination in terms of the problem. Fortunately, you're at the very early stages. It was actually diagnosed probably because they had the dog anesthetized and they looked in and they saw that there was one of the laryngeal folds was not functioning normally, which is typically what we have to anesthetize them to diagnose it, but they found it on dental. So you're lucky that it's happening early, and you're lucky that you can get in there with early intervention with some of the things I've suggested. I don't have any experience treating this with fecal with microbiome restorative therapy. Is this something that you would address with that, Margot? I mean, it seems like it's the cure-all for everything.
Well, you know, precursors for the neurotransmitters and what kind of
Okay.
damage and inflammation. When in some of the ozone groups, that some people have said they've injected ozone around the larynx. I
Okay.
used to do acupuncture around it, and I got some good results with that, just
Yeah.
acupuncture. But I haven't tried doing, I mean, I have cases where the animal's paralyzed in the back, and we do put ozone over it and then do acupuncture. And I have not done one of that on the laryngeal paralysis. But I think getting anywhere you can get more oxygen into the system, that's going to be good for any repair. Anywhere that you can increase neurotransmitters to be created by the gut, they're going to help all the different, attachments of the nerves and where they're innervating, and get the brain working better, because the brain gut connection, the vagal nerve working better. So I think, it's something as simple as poop, and somebody asks me, my dog's eating bunny poop, they're self-medicating. They know they need something. And in the wild, they would kill that bunny and eat the whole thing with the intestines and everything. And now they're getting sterile food in a bowl. And so,
Yeah.
they're really interested in eating the gut.
Well, and
Yeah,
that's a good point too, because we know that wild animals, the first thing they go to is they eat the gut, you
right,
know.
right.
And we used to say, well, that's how they're getting, their digestive enzymes and their probiotics, and they're also, getting their microbiome. So that's cool. So another question here was my thoughts on raw goat's milk with live cultures. My 4.5-year-old female Dalmatian loves it. Well, I mean, I'm sure she loves it. I'm sure, I mean, any form of bacterial cultures, I think, is going to be beneficial. I can't really speak to that specific, product that you're discussing. I know that goat's milk is very popular, as an addition with many of our natural feeders, with many of our raw feeders, and fermented goat's milk in particular. I know Green Juju, I think they've got a fermented goat's milk. A number of different companies do. So it seems as though
Solutions, yeah, Solutions has a goat nog, which is a
goat nog.
fermented goat nog, and it's a duck egg um, with goat milk. And that's actually what I've been raising my puppies on, is
Oh,
that.
okay. Well, that's good to know. I know Solutions. They used to be part of Answer's pet food, and they kind of split off when split off when that.
Yeah, Jackie's dog.
When Jackie died, and then Solutions, the person who has Solutions is her sister, and then Green Juju was Billy, who was working with them then. So it's interesting how the industry has been changing and evolving. And then Gretchen asks, is it too much fish if I supplement with Nordic Naturals along with the functional feline product? I'm always so curious about these questions about is it too much of something? I mean, as a fish lover, I can't imagine there being too much fish. But no, I think there's not too much fish at all. I mean, maybe you're referring to fish oil. And what we're finding is that really high doses of fish oil actually are even more appropriate for treating some of these chronic systemic inflammatory diseases. With the basic anti-inflammatory dosage for fish oil is you take the amount of EPA and you take the amount of DHA and you add them together, and then you take that amount and it's 100 mgs per kg or 50 milligrams per pound of body weight per day of the EPA DHA. That's quite a bit, but if you have osteoarthritis, you give 3 times that much. So I think the only place that you're talking about it being too much fish is if the animal has some sort of a reaction to that much fat in the system. And recently there's been some studies that debunk the whole fat causing pancreatitis thing. A fat can certainly enhance it, but it's not the cause of it. In some animals, they're sensitive to it. So I wouldn't, if that's also in the back of your mind when you're asking about too much fish, I would say no. And the nice thing about the krill meal is that it's a meal. It's not an oil. and it has the phospholipids, and the phospholipids are like lecithin is a phospholipid, and what they are is they're surfactants. They improve the absorption of fatty material in through the bowel, because the bowel has this water soluble barrier, and phospholipids have both a fatty part to the molecule and a water part. So the fatty part joins to the fatty acid, and then the water part allows it to get better absorbed. So it's only too much fish, Gretchen, if your dog has a problem eating that much. And dogs are known to be able to tolerate large amounts of fat, but it needs to be introduced slowly. So there you go. And I think anything else? And then it's about dogs eating bunny poop. I think Margot answered that one. So, okay, well, I think that pretty much brings us up to the end of our questions, unless anyone has anything else to ask. I thank you all for coming tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next month, where we're going to continue the conversation, and I'm going to share with you this new product, this new company I'm working with that is microbiome based, because I think you'll find that what they've got to offer is really pretty cool, including testing their own proprietary test. So we'll talk about that then. And if you have questions that weren't answered or come up, reach out to me. My email address is somewhere, should be fairly readily available. And I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you all for attending. And thank you, Margot. And
Well, thank you for having me speak.
thank you, Mary, both. It
And
was
again, the book is now available. We have copies, so you can get a signed copy.